reason that I'm here is because the club is seeking change.
He said, well, whether you come or not, you're going to see a completely different Spurs team under me.
My hope and my desire and what I'm going to try and do is give our supporters hope and belief that we're going to embark on something special.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Astetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 212. It is our last episode of calendar year 2024. We thank you for joining us. We've got a busy show. It will be a year-end show of sorts, a halfway through the Premier League season show of sorts, and probably a lot more bitching and moaning to come because Spurs continue to drive us absolutely up a wall with the way that they are playing right now. Alongside to talk about it is Caroline. She is at CG Stefko. Caroline, how are you on this final Sunday of 2024?
I woke up with a bit of a sore throat this morning, and yelling at my TV for 90 minutes did not help. But I mean, I'm here. I'm getting behind the team one way or another. So
whatever would make you yell at the TV. Not our beloved
Several
Tottenham
things.
Hotspur. No chance. Scott is also with us. He is at Scott G. Bird. Scott, what's going on, my friend?
Iowa State got a big win yesterday, so we'll talk about them. They got to eat a giant Pop-Tart, so just a wonderful Saturday to take the edge off a pretty awful footballing Sunday.
To all of our overseas and international listeners, the European mind cannot comprehend. The European mind cannot comprehend the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Let me tell you. Like, the Pop-Tarts Bowl is something that has evolved over the last handful of years into, I don't even know what into, but yes, Iowa State Pop-Tart Bowl champions. Congratulations to your Cyclones for that. That is quite an accomplishment. They get to take home the trophy, which is a literal toaster. I don't even know if the European mind can't comprehend. I think the American mind can't really comprehend either. So that makes a lot of sense to me. We want to start out today's show by congratulating our listener, Jenna, who found us on Blue Sky and won herself a $50 gift card to use at digitalspurs.com. We love digitalspurs.com. We are delighted to be partnered with them this season. Tottenham merch, gobs and gobs of it. T-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, hats, so much more. We love Digital Spurs. And yes, Jenna won our holiday contest, has won herself a $50 gift card for some new merch. Congratulations. We want you also to head to digitalspurs.com. Go there for your new Tottenham merch. It's a good way to rock your Tottenham gear and not actually give the club any money right now if you're feeling that way. But we love Digital Spurs. Go check them out, digitalspurs.com, and let them know that we here at the Tottenham Depot sent you. Guys, let's start on Boxing Day with what was this was news to me, the first Boxing Day defeat for Tottenham Hotspur since 2003 occurred on Thursday in what I described as a lifeless 1-0 defeat away to Nottingham Forest. Jed Spence was sent off after a second yellow card late in this match. And that was pretty much the most notable thing that happened in my mind, because otherwise this was a dud. Caroline, Spurs just kind of had a lot of the ball and didn't really either know what to do with it or feel like they wanted to do anything with it. A 1-0 defeat to what is now, after Sunday, second place Nottingham Forest, led by Nuno Espirito Santo. This is 2024. This is the world we live in. This is where we are at this point. What can you remember back? I know this is a match ago now, but what can we remember back about this match on Thursday and kind of just how it all went down?
Well, I tried to get my sister and her kids to watch this game with me, and they quickly became bored and gave up.
I wonder why.
It was not a good game. Like, it was not scintillating football. It was not Ange ball as we think of it. And, we've been talking about this a lot off pod, but I just feel like these players are completely out of juice, to put it, simply. Like, they look exhausted. I feel like the mental fatigue is starting to play a part, and we just weren't sharp in this game, and I feel like Nottingham Forest, they're a team that are very well organized because they are a Nuno team. And once they got that, opening goal, I kind of was like, well, this is not good, because they have the capability to manage a game and see it out. And indeed they did.
Scott, where are you at? This is obviously like, I don't know what people expect at this point. You're going up against a team that is clearly better than you this season. I know that when you look at Nottingham Forest versus Spurs, you wouldn't think that, but this is the second place team in the Premier League right now. These are, I guess we can say, title contenders, because if you're calling teams like Chelsea and Arsenal title contenders with Liverpool, so are Nottingham Forest. And Spurs lose this match 1-0, and it was, like Caroline said, kind of boring. Like it kind of just looked like the batteries had all been drained from Spurs bodies.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is I do think part of why they're in second place is because there's just a handful of really good teams who are really poor this season, right? So that does factor in. But they're in second place. They play very, very pragmatic football, and they prioritize results, right? And that's why why they're in the position they're in. I would say that I expected this. I expected to lose this match simply because they're not going to give you any space behind the back line. They counter well, and that's a recipe for this team to lose 99 out of 100 times in its current state. We had 71% of the ball and generated 4 shots on target from that 71%, which is just an abysmal performance offensively. And as we know, the way that Ange wants to play, if you don't create chances, you're going to lose. Again, 99 out of 100 times, right? We're going to concede goals in this system. And if we can't score them, we're going to have a bad time, as they would say. And their goal was just honestly exactly how they would have drawn it up. Find a way to turn the ball over or win the ball back right around the 18, switch the field, go down the line, and you're in almost every single time. And again, this is not a dig at Ange Postecoglou, but anyone with a footballing brain that watches us would say you're going to be able to beat Spurs by doing exactly that. And unfortunately, it was Jed Spence who turned the ball over. So your fullback turns the ball over again on the 18, and it's just wonderfully set up to score the goal that they did, and that was all they needed. So not surprised at all by this. I think it was kind of written in the stars from the jump, and that's unfortunate.
It's a real bummer for Jed Spence too, who obviously helped Nottingham Forest a few years ago while on loan come up, and he's had a really strong run of games, I feel like, since getting some more regular time due to, as I gesture wildly, everything going on, like the injuries, the poor play, like the need for warm bodies. Jed Spence has had a good run of games, and the second yellow was unfortunate late. It was not a good decision to go in on that challenge. He obviously had to miss the game earlier today against Wolves because of it, serving the suspension. But I'm not, like, just to kind of put the button on Jed Spence specifically, I'm certainly not checked out on Jed Spence. I think there's still something there. The fact that we're seeing Sergio Reguilon get minutes at this point because Jed Spence was suspended is just like, what world are we living in? But this was one of those games against Forest that I can't even pin on like any one player. I can't even pin it on 4 or 5 players. It was just collectively a bad performance. And to the point you were making, Caroline, like it's obvious at this point that this squad is so depleted, both from a there have been too many games standpoint and from a there have been too many injuries standpoint. And I know that like every team goes through this, and every team is battling the same exact thing in the Premier League. Like, it's incredible. I'm seeing photos from players from different leagues on vacation right now, and like we still do this bit where the Premier League is just going to play 2 games a week all throughout the month of December and even into January. It's still going to continue with cup matches coming up and everything like it. So we kind of just take this as normal, and we have to, because this is the spot that the club is in. But it's certainly not normal for human bodies to have to endure what they're going through. And It's not normal for football clubs either to have to, build their squads out to the point where, like, the teams that we're seeing have success, have depth, and have not been bitten by the injury bug. And Scott, to your point about Forest, the XG table, if you will, would say that they are way ahead of where they should be. Like, and Spurs are way below, but like that, you don't play the games on paper, you play them on the pitch. And right now Spurs are simply not getting it done there.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that you can't pin it on any one player, I have to caveat this with I believe in Ange Postecoglou tremendously, and I don't think that he's necessarily the problem here, but it's all down to the system in that match against Forest. The only way we've scored in the past 90 days is by transitioning out of the midfield. That's the only way that we can find goals as a club right now. And against the low block, you're never going to get opportunities to transition out of the midfield. And so in a way, we're just sending the same team out. And again, we have to, right? But we're just sending the same team out and saying, someone find a way to beat the block. Someone find a way to beat the block. It doesn't happen ever, right? And so that's where I say I was just so confident that we would lose this match. I'm not saying that I'm like making predictions that are true or anything. I just knew in my heart that we were set up to lose this match because there was going to be no way to transition out of the midfield quickly. It's like we don't counter, but we like counter out of the midfield so well. And we just, again, are never going to have a chance to do that if we're not playing against, frankly, a team in the top 6, right? That's how we scored 3 goals against Liverpool. We just unfortunately conceded 6 of them. So,
well, let's get stuck in on that tactically a little bit, because I know one of your favorite parts of this team to talk about, or any team to talk about, is the midfield. And that's why I'm so confused that for the last handful of matches, we haven't seen more of specifically James Maddison, but some combo of James Maddison and Pat Matisar, because those are the guys that I feel like do what you're talking about best. It's not the likes of Bentancur, Basuma. It's instead it's Maddison, Sarr, Kulusevski, who get that job done on a more, the old picking locks bit. Like, I feel like that's what has been needed. And like you said, when you have in a game like this against Forest, you have 70% of the ball, you need to figure out against the low block what you're going to do in order to break that. And I feel like we've seen games where James Maddison's been able to do it. We've seen, Dejan Kulusevski has kind of been the antidote to all ills that have faced Tottenham at this point this season. He's had a bad game or two, but like for the most part, Kulusevski's been the most consistent player and has been able to provide exactly what you're talking about, just that ability to press through the midfield and get the ball into dangerous positions. We saw it again today in the game against Wolves, but I don't know why we're not seeing more of James Maddison from the jump. We're instead seeing him come on in games when we're either down or needing to turn something on. And that's not like, I don't think James Maddison is a microwave. I think he's a guy who needs to build it up throughout the game and find it. You can't just snap your finger and say, okay, James, go change the game. That's not how he works.
Yeah. I don't, sorry, Caroline, just real quick. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I also think it's a lot more than selection. Because again, teams are setting themselves up to not give us the chance to break out of the midfield. So it could be Maddison, it could be Bergvall, it could be Sarr, it could be whomever. But I think it's more of how the opposition is preparing themselves to beat us than anything. Like Southampton, for example, was Sarr, Maddison, and Kulusevski, if I'm not mistaken. Bergvall started. Help me out here. I know Sarr and Bergvall started. Kulusevski was potentially on the right with Maddison in the midfield. And I thought Sarr, Bergvall, and Maddison, if that's what it was, looked good.
Yeah, you have that right. It was Sarr, Maddison, Bergvall.
Thank you. But maybe Kula didn't even start. I can't remember.
He did. He was out on the right.
On the right.
He was out on the right.
But either way, I'm looking in the midfield here, and I think that midfield looked good, but Southampton gets forward. They didn't sit in a low block, right? And so I believe in Ange, but he has to figure out a way to beat a low block. It's on the players, but it's also on the manager, because we are playing the same way against every single opponent, and something is going to have to change for us to beat a low block. Because look, like, I can say, yes, injuries, yes, unfortunate circumstances, but we're only missing our 2 center backs today, if you really get down to it, right? And they're very good, but that's all we're missing if you want to talk first 11.
The goalkeeper as well, which is a really big factor in this team.
100%, no question about it. Like, and those things really do factor in. But I'm not going to say that we can't beat Wolves because of that. Like, I'm not going to say that ever. So we have to find a way to beat these teams that we're just frankly not beating. Like, this is not just, we drop points. This is a long a long string of poor results for this club. And I think that if Levy hadn't put himself in this position where everybody sees the writing on the wall that he scapegoats managers because of what he doesn't give to the club, I think Ainge would be sacked by now. But I think Levy knows he can't do that without the weight of the world crashing down on him, right? He might please a couple of random fans on Twitter if he were to do that. And again, I want Ainge at the club, but I think if Levy hadn't been painted in the light he's finally been painted in correctly, in my opinion, Ainge would have been sacked, because these results are, again, it's a long string of really poor results, and we've dropped points against poor teams for quite a while now. So something's going to have to change.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that this was much closer to our ideal lineup than we've had in a while, but I don't feel like a lot of those, A-team players are at their best at the moment.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel to me like we're even close to like mid-strength at the moment, like all things considered. So that's tough. But I feel like we've seen some kind of minor tweaks from Ange in terms of the tactical approach, because I felt like we did not have players getting forward as often as we're used to. Like, he was trying to give them an opportunity to conserve some of that energy for like key moments. But I feel like where the stubbornness is still coming in is with some of the team selection, even knowing it's really constrained right now. I was confused by the decision to start Dragusin. I felt like that was a risk that, all like knowing that the luck we've had with injuries, I'm not going to feel good about a player, who is doubtful to play coming in. When I feel like this is the time when you give Dorrington a chance.
Yeah,
and it's a big call, but again, a team like Wolves, theoretically, when is there going to be a better opportunity? And even something like, obviously Spence was suspended for this game, but I feel like Ange has kind of still had him on a short leash, and we might not see him again, because he's just that kind of manager that, like with Madison, it kind of seems inexplicable that he's not getting as many starts, but that's just kind of the way he has been since he's managed Tottenham. So I don't know.
Well, and all of that gets the caveat too that we don't know if there's little stuff going on behind the scenes. The Dragusin one was weird because he goes off late in the match on Thursday against Forest, and it's like, okay, what the hell are Spurs going to do in central defense? You like Archie Gray is there, and that's not even his natural position. Although I will add parenthetically, Archie Gray has looked damn good at center back, and I'm like fine with seeing more of that if that's the case. But the Dragusin one is interesting only because, and Ange was asked about it after the Wolves draw as well, and he basically said we had no choice, because if Radu doesn't play, he doesn't know who does. And you're saying Dorrington, like I don't know if there's something going on there too, or if there's just an unwillingness to play two 18-year-olds at the back, like, which, to be fair, I can also,
because
but you know what?
Like in his press comments, he'll say, my other option is to play a 17 or 18-year-old. So we're in the situation where those are the players we have, and he clearly doesn't trust a lot of them. So that's a bad squad building situation.
The other thing he said about Dragusin, though, in his defense, and look, this is really simply me playing devil's advocate, because I don't know that I'd feel confident playing two 18-year-olds in front of Fraser Forster either. Like I don't know if I would have the gumption to do that. But he said about Dragusin basically that it was an ankle, it wasn't muscular, like there wasn't much of a risk of him furthering it. He's just not 100% going out there. It's probably painful to play through. I think that's the real shame of it, just from a human level, is these guys are being asked to continue to go out there when they're not at their best. And I know that's what they signed up for. It's the job, and that's what they're doing. But it sucks that so many players are having to do it for so long throughout this season that feels like we're having to endure it at this point. I want to go back to something Scott said a second ago about the midfield, because I do feel as if, like you said, you're not sure it's down to selection. I agree with that. It's not all down to selection, but I think at the core problem of this team still remains their inability to get after teams that are going to sit back, and their ability to have success against teams that will come after them. And we see it if you could just look down at the list of results, you see it. I mean, exclude, Europa League games, for example, just because the level of competition is different there. But if you go through, I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that Spurs had not lost a game by more than a goal, and all of their wins were coming by multiple goals. Like that's how this has kind of gone all season long. And I think that's really telling about this team, because we know for a fact that when there's lots of goals being scored and the teams are going up and down the pitch, they're going to be in it, and they're probably going to be on the good side of it, more times than not, at least. And when they're having to nick a game 1-0, 2-1, that's where they find more of a challenge. They find more of a challenge in a game where teams are going to get stuck in against them. I mean, we even saw Arsenal do it. Arsenal didn't come after Spurs, and they won that game 1-0. Like, if you go back and look at all the fixtures over the last few months for this season, that's been the result. Like when a team comes after Spurs, they're going to have an opportunity to be successful. When a team doesn't, it's going to be a struggle.
Well, and that's kind of where I just can continue to find myself frustrated. Is we're very easy to beat if you know how to do it, and that is on the manager at some point, right? Like it always is. We can cite depth, we can cite whatever, but the manager's job is to find ways to win matches, and we're too easy to tactically approach in a manner that will win you a football game. If I had to pinpoint our one area of concern, or like if I was asked what is the one reason we suck, it's our wingers, 100%, because to beat a low block, you have to recycle the ball around and get your winger in a 1v1 situation and have someone that can beat a man 1v1. We don't have anyone that can do that. Presumably Odegaard can, maybe, but that remains to be seen, right? I'll tell you what, I love Son. He is absolutely flat out incapable of doing that. He cannot do it. I'm very tired of seeing Son receive the ball and just stand there and freeze and wait for things to happen around him. I don't think he does anything else when he receives the ball. I've said it for years on this podcast. Son is only good in a counterattacking setup or against a team that gets forward. And that's why he's always world-class against the top six, we could say, and struggles against the bottom feeder teams. Is Son is just absolutely ineffective against a low block and always has been. So I'm not painting him in a bad light. I'm not saying this is Son's fault, but Son was never going to be the winger that we need, right? In my opinion, we need guys that can do that. Johnson cannot. Timo cannot. Johnson's really good when we break out of the midfield, which you talked about a lot, right? And Timo, frankly, is too. Son maybe as well, but we just don't have anyone that can take a guy one-on-one, and that's where you're never going to be able to beat a low block. Because if you look at the teams that can do it, City, Liverpool, and I know City is a weird example of this season, right? But those teams all have guys that you can find in situations where they isolate into a 1v1 and beat their man or chip a cross in or something, and we just don't have that.
Well, the other way, which Andrew kind of alluded to, is the Arsenal approach, which is to get really good at set pieces, which we certainly have not seemed to be working on.
I don't know. I don't know.
In the Wolves game, but yeah, in this game against Nottingham Forest, we had 7 corners, did absolutely nothing with them. And it's, obviously Arsenal's approach is a little like borderline cheating, if you ask me, on some of those strategies. But it's still an area where if you're talking about like marginal gains and making tweaks, like this is something they could try to work on. Because, it's true. Like we don't have kind of the personnel to succeed against a low block team necessarily. So like try something else.
It's the winger conversation is interesting too, though, because they're really only missing 2 wingers through injury, Odegaard and Richarlison. I'm not counting on Richarlison anymore. Like I think that ship has sailed, and I think that speaking of sailed, like hopefully a sail can happen when it comes to Richarlison. Odegaard is a complete unknown, obviously. Shout out Bob Dylan. Like, I just don't know. I don't know what's going on there. Like, he's obviously hurt, and it's gonna be a while. And even when it gets back, he's 20. Like, I don't know what Wilson Odegaard is gonna be. If we're talking about what this team has in that department, we're talking about Heung-min Son, who, I'll just be frank about it. I know he's our captain, and I know he's a club legend. He should be coming off the bench at this point in his career. He's not capable of going more than 60 minutes in a game, and I think you can get him for 45 minutes at a pop and be fine with that. And he just does not have the legs to play this much football at this point in his career. And Scott, I think you were just alluding to that. On the other side, you've got Brennan Johnson, who I think is probably also a player who should be coming off the bench, a very good player. And we saw a very good game out of him today against Wolves. We've seen he had a really bright early part of the season as well, kind of has went away the last few months, but he's also sharing time with Kulusevski, who's playing in this kind of hybrid role between the midfield and right wing, which I like for Kulusevski because I think he can do both and he can show different things against different opponents. And then the other one is Timo Werner, who is obviously not worthy of the shirt right now. Like he's that bad. And I've tried with Timo Werner. I've tried to like hang on to hope that he could be like the guy that comes on in the 70th minute and provides something. He just ain't that dude. It's fine. Like they tried something, it did not work. But like there aren't a ton of options outside of the guys I just named, who are all pretty much guys I think are not like everyday Premier League starter. Like Kulusevski obviously is, and he might be for Manchester City soon. Like who knows? Like I think that's the point we're reaching. Like we have one guy that can play out wide and do dribbly winger things, and that's about it. And we would actually prefer to have him in midfield because he's really, really good there as well.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. We talked a lot about the way that we built the squad. I think Caroline brought it up earlier. We have a squad building problem. This sounds a little bit aggressive or harsh on the squad, but I think there's 4 guys in our squad who are cemented, and everyone else has competition for their place if we have the depth. It's Solanke, it's Kulusevski, and it's the 2 center. Sorry, I'll say 5. I'll say Vicario as well. And not there couldn't even be competition there, right? But I think those 5 guys with maybe an asterisk next to Vicario's name are the only guys who I feel very confident in right now on this squad. And I'm not even talking about guys that are injured, like Odegaard, Richarlison. I don't necessarily think that they walk right into first 11s at this point, right? So it's a little bit concerning to me how much money we've spent, and I feel that only 4.5 guys on our team are cemented in their role right now. And again, we bought a lot of young players, and maybe that factors into it too. I don't know exactly what decisions that were made. Obviously, we're looking to the future, but the way that we spent money, we haven't seen the return on investment that we would expect. And that's kind of been the story of Tottenham Hotspur for as long as I've been a fan.
Caroline, I'm really curious about a post that you sent earlier today. And I didn't preface this with you, but this kind of speaks to what we were talking about. You posted on Blue Sky earlier that you're a little bummed out by just how many players on this squad that you've now personally written off. And that's kind of what Scott's talking about right now. It's like the squad building has just not been good enough. Who are these players? I'm curious because I feel like the list could be pretty long. I'm not even disagreeing with you. I just want to know who these players are.
I mean, the good news is that most of these players I'm talking about are the ones who are already on the fringe and right now are, getting minutes out of necessity. I've been on record that I don't feel good about either of our starting number 6s, and we're not counting Archie in this because he's not actually playing there right now. But Bissouma, Bentancur, I'm just about out of patience with both of them. And obviously Bentancur's, suspension for the next match did not help that decision.
Yeah, he did pick up a 5th yellow card right at the wire.
Decision making is never there for me with them. And that's a huge frustration because that's supposed to be like part of the spine of your team and the reliable part of your team that kind of builds the foundation for everything else to go right. And I think that's really indicative of why we struggle so much a lot of the time. But then you've also got, a player like Dragushin, who I don't think is a bad player. I don't think he's the right player for our team and for the kind of ball we're trying to play. So that's just kind of an unfortunate, bad transfer decision that didn't work out. Those things happen. But then, I don't know.
Well, he was like the warm body that Spurs just brought in because they needed a center back. And like,
right.
That's almost what I'm afraid of what's going to happen this January because of what we're going through once again.
Yeah, I hear you. Because it does feel like we really need to start thinking, and I do think we have been with some of the young players that we're bringing in, thinking with actual long-term planning in effect. it's the problem is then you have to be patient for those moves to actually work out. But yeah, I don't think we can be so, hasty with our transfer business in January, because to me, this season, like the league season, it's already becoming close to a write-off. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be, a stereotype like of Scott and say like I'm a cup guy now, but
You are a cup guy now. That's true.
I'm a cup guy now. It's where we're at. Like,
It's a good place to be right now.
yeah, well, for the sake of my mental health, I think, yes, I just have to, accept that the league is not in a good place this season. And we've already lost too many games for it to be realistic to get into those European spots. And it also would rely on the teams above us really screwing up. And I don't know, a lot of them are just looking better than us right now.
What's really funny? Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, sorry, Andrew. I was just going to say, look at that stat across the bottom of the screen for those who are joining us on YouTube right now. Tottenham are 11th on 24 points halfway through the season. If we take a mathematical approach and we double that to 48 points, they say 40 to 42 points is what keeps you safe in the league, right? Anything less than that, there's a good chance you're getting relegated. And mathematically, we finished just above that safety zone this season. And again, a lot can change, right? I'm not saying that we're just written off as securing 48 points across the season, but for a team that typically secures anywhere from like 55 to 70, we could say, it's really poor. And thank goodness that we're still in a couple of cups, because if we didn't have opportunities to win trophies right now, I might not even watch this team, to be completely honest. There's just nothing to take out of league matches. And back to Caroline's point that we're all cup people at this point, right? I'm at the point where I don't care what happens in league matches, because whether we win or lose, we're a mid-table team.
Well, just to back up your math there, Scott, I looked at last year's table. 48 points at the end of the season with our goal difference where it is would indeed have us in 11th place. Like, it is the exact spot that we sit in.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, better than I.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me right now, all I'm expecting out of our league games is that the players are trying their best. And I do think that was true today. And, I think Ange echoed that in his press conference. They're giving it their all. They just don't have much to give. and that's just how it is. So
I think that's a really good point, Caroline. And I saw a lot of people digging out at specific players, even not only after the Wolves match, but after the Forest match this week. I saw specific digs being taken at it, like Dominic Solanke for not running enough, and just like dumb shit like that. And I don't know, like it again, I don't know where the cynicism and the nihilism infected this fan base so much, but it really, really has. And it's something that, like, Scott, you're talking about, like, if it wasn't for this, I'd be checked out. I don't blame you for that. Like, couldn't be me. I'm going to watch the games. Like, and I know you are too. I know you're saying that.
I would watch, right? But
you would watch, but there is a frustration. And I do feel like that's the healthy approach. Like, if it's making you this miserable, go touch grass, go do something. Don't watch, take a week off. It's okay to do so. Like, it's not that serious.
I still feel like we're still staying in games for the most part. It's still interesting to watch. I will say the Nottingham Forest game was pretty dire. That was not
that was probably the toughest watch of the season, if we're being honest.
But for the most part, even in these games where we're in the same situation with like the injuries and the suspensions, we still had some decent opportunities. Like, there's, the drama of football. Like, it's still there. It's always going to be there when we have Fraser Forster in goal.
My goodness,
he's another one of those players that I just can't. But it is what it is.
Well, and the sad thing is we started going through that list of players that you've given off, and we've really only named like 4 of them, but like those are the players that are just being forced into action.
A big role lately, exactly. So it's frustrating because it's, we literally have no one else, because the Ange does not trust either of the homegrown keepers. So.
Or the homegrown young center back, or anyone else to play at the 6, because he doesn't have Gray to be able to throw in there, because he needs the injuries, and it's the squad building, and it's like, you can keep going with this. It's all of the things. It's the it's a massive, like, I mean, last week I jokingly said that the episode was the holiday stew. Like that is kind of what this has been. We've reached the holiday season now, and like we're almost to the new year, and this whole stew has just built up, and it's not very good smelling. Like it is not filling the house with a lot of warmth right now, because it is bad. Like things are just bad.
Well,
And I think that's where like the conversation turns to. I see still all these people. Oh, are you Enoch out? Are you Levy out? Are you Ange out? Like, are you like, none of that really actually matters in the long term. The thing that matters is that the club is doing things the right way and trying to build the right way. I'm so uninterested in folks saying that they are Levy out or Enoch out, because you don't get to determine that. That's the ownership, and they're going to do what they do. Now, you can have an opinion on the manager, I think, even more so, and whether or not you think he's doing the right things. But I can also see that, I can't hand a carpenter a hammer and expect him to unscrew a nail. Like that's just not possible.
You just hit the nail on the head, because I think the main issue again is that our squad building went from Pochettino, who played oppressive attacking football, to Mourinho, Nuno, Conte, and you invested in all three of them, and then you turned and brought in a manager who plays in a similar manner to Pochettino. Like, so that's where I say, like, we have two choices right now. We either wait this out until Ange has what he needs. I guess we have three choices. You wait this out until Ange has what he needs, or you bring in somebody who's a defensive minded manager, because he would have the tools to actually, he or she would have the tools to do fairly well with the squad. When we're talking about Son and Johnson, who are very good at getting behind lines that are pressing forward on the counter, right? And I look at Basuma, who's a good defensive midfielder, but isn't always great when it comes to progression, right? I look at Dragushin. So anyways, you guys understand what I'm getting at. We just put ourselves in a conundrum where, as you said, Andrew, we're asking someone to use a hammer to screw screws in, and it's just it's of a bit of a mess, and that's why we're in 11th place.
Well, and not to like further the metaphor any further, but at least for this role, he's hired a carpenter, because previously he was hiring plumbers to do a carpenter's job. Like that's part of the problem.
Sure.
Like I can at least like, and that's why I can get behind this still. Like that's the only reason, because I can see that this is a guy who actually knows how to do a job like this. It's just going to take time. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, the whole thing. Like all the cliches can be thrown in here. I just know that I know that football is not the game for patience. I know that fans of football are not built to have patience. And I know that with this club specifically, there's something in the DNA, be it the lack of actual trophies in the cabinet over the last decade and a half, be it just the kind of, like I said, the cynicism that is kind of baked in with the cake. There's a lot of that, and that's really infectious too. Like that cynicism and kind of what you're talking about. Oh, if it's, I wouldn't even watch if XYZ, like that's, and then I don't blame folks for being that way. It's frustrating to watch this, but at the same time, if you're not, I guess in my opinion, if you're not having hope, especially like this is supposed to be the time of hope, right? It's the end of a calendar year. Like we're looking ahead. Folks do this all the time. If we're not going to look forward with a little bit of hope, what are we doing? We're just gonna be cynical assholes, all of us, the lot. Like, no, I'm not down for that. I don't like it.
And to piggyback off the "what are we doing" question, for anyone that's wondering whether or not they're Ange in or out, I would say, and I'm not telling people how to feel, I'm just expressing my own opinion. You have no choice but to give Ange Postecoglou time. If you don't, you're going to find yourself in the same cycle that you've been in for Enoch's entire tenure, to be completely honest. I still feel very much so that if you just would have given Pochettino time, he'd still be our manager right now, and things could look a lot different. And I think Levy knows that. I also say that there's a lot of fans who wanted Pochettino sacked at the time because the run of form was very poor, and now are looking at the situation and saying Ange out, and it's extremely contradictory. Like, we have to give, I don't care if it's Nuno or Conte or Poch or Ange, you have to just give your manager time. When you keep flipping back and forth in the manner that we have, you have no other option. So we can either let Ange do what he does and give him the time to do it, where we can find ourselves having the same fucking conversation 365 days from today?
Well, and the question that I keep seeing in the fan base, which I think is very valid, is who would actually do a better job than Ange with what he has to work with? And I don't think there's anybody outside of maybe like, I don't know, Carlo Ancelotti is a miracle maker, but he's obviously not available. So I think
Ryan
you're
Mason.
right.
Let's
Andrew,
throw him in there, see what he does.
Nice.
Yeah, good old Ryan. But I think the patience point is very important because we can't undersell how far, those, what was it, like 2 or 3 transfer windows where we made 0 transfers, like that really set us back, and we're still recovering from it. And not to mention, the following windows where we just made really rash, poor fit buys and are still trying to get rid of some of them, like Region. So it's, we have to be willing to see out this rebuild. And I know I brought this up in our last pod, but I really think that growing up as primarily an NBA fan has like prepared me well for this, because I understand that there are going to be seasons when your team is just not good, and there are going to be painful losses. There are going to be a lot of losses, and they're going to happen over and over. And you just have to have some faith that your front office, so to speak, knows what they're doing, and there is a plan. And, and sometimes you get a Wemby.
Hey, look, for those who like, you're bringing up the basketball comp. For those who follow baseball, I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan. 85% of my lifetime, they have been a bad team, and they knew they were going to be a bad team. And like, that's just how it goes in sometimes, like, you have to fight through those seasons to get out of it. On Ange, look, I don't want everything the Ange in, Ange out conversation to turn into, this is not a binary for me. Like, Ange Postecoglou deserves criticism at times for things that he does. I wouldn't say a lot of what he says, because I think a lot of the way that he presents himself, I think he's starting to get really frustrated in press conferences by the media, which I can understand. They're asking the same exact questions. He's giving the same exact answers. I can get why that would be tiresome, but I think for the most part, people like Ange Postecoglou. They like his mindset, his mantra, his oeuvre, if you will. Like, he's got good vibes. And I'm not just saying in comparison to the last handful of managers that this club had. Like, I'm just saying in general. It's easy to look back at the last couple of managers and say their oeuvre was not as pleasant as Ange's. I'm not even doing that in comparison. But that's not to say that Ange doesn't deserve criticism for certain decisions. I'm still confused. And again, with the caveat that I don't know all the ins and outs of who has a knock, who needs more time, who can't be putting in this many minutes in a match right now. But like, there are team selection decisions. There is an approach decision, which we've talked about ad nauseum on this pod. And we were just talking about it earlier, Scott, in regards to, you've got to learn how to play a certain kind of way in this league. And that was a lot of the criticism that was going to come for Ange even before he got the job, was, oh, what does this Australian guy who has only really had success in Scotland know about coaching in the Premier League? And like, maybe we're seeing a little bit of that. Maybe there is a little bit of this guy could be a little bit out of his depth. We don't know that, but we won't know that until we give it enough time to know that. And I don't think we've given it enough time to know that at this point.
Yeah. If I'm completely honest, I'm asking that question to myself more often than I would like to right now. And again, I believe in Ange. So I keep having to say this because I find myself asking tough questions and just want the listener to know I'm not ready to sack Ange Postecoglou, but I am asking that question. I do look at the Scottish League as having 2 mid-table Premier League teams and a bunch of League One teams besides those 2, right? So it is going to be much easier to swallow fire in Scotland as it is in the Premier League when it comes to the approach to football. And I get frustrated with Ange in numerous situations, most recently in a press conference where he said, you guys are asking me to flip a switch and change what I'm doing. I'm not going to do that. And I'm sitting here saying, Ange, I'm not asking you to change, man. I'm asking you to see out a lead. Those are very different things. Like, I'm not asking you to switch your favorite color from red to blue. Horrible metaphor, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say here. I'm asking you to just see out a lead. That's all I'm asking you here, right? I'm not asking you to reinvent your style of play. And I don't think it can be in this league as black and white as he wants to make it out to be. Again, he's just swallowing fire over and over and over again, and it's not working, right? And so, again, that's where I say, like, where's the balance between prioritizing implementing the style and getting the team there over results? Because at some point, results have to be considered, right? But at the same time, we need to keep building to what we're trying to do under Ange. If not, why are we giving him time, right? But again, I just don't think it has to be so black and white. I think that you can see out leads without changing, the way that you play football.
I think the most prominent example that we've seen of this team seeing out a lead was in the cup match against Manchester United a few weeks ago when they had to hang on late. They even gave up the goal in stoppage time, but it was like, okay, we had the 4-2 lead. We could afford to give one up in stoppage time and win this match 4-3. Like that's the example of it. And I don't know that you can always play that swashbuckling style of football in the Premier League either. Like, I think that's where the questions come in. Something you brought up, Scott, before we started recording was talking about Ange's first 10 games and like how great they were last season. And then everything kind of went to hell in a handbasket after the Chelsea match. But did that kind of give us a false pretense of what Ange ball could be? We've seen it in glimpses this year. We saw it against Southampton. We saw it against Manchester City. We saw it against was it Villa earlier in the season that we got like in a really big game like that. We've seen it against pretty good teams. Not that Southampton's great, but we've seen it against Premier League level teams in and out. But we've also seen the bad side of it and what it can be. So I think the dichotomy of what the two things can be leaves me with, okay, well, if it can at least be a little bit better than somewhere in the middle, I'm good with that because that's going to give you a chance to build and grow from there. I think that where this conversation gets super, super murky is when we talk about what he needs to get it done. And we talked earlier about, bringing in Radu Dragusin last January and how kind of weird that was because Spurs just needed a warm body and, oh, this guy is being looked at by Bayern Munich. Let's go swipe him and there we go. Like we've got our new center back. And now this guy who's not really a fit for this system is stuck playing a lot of minutes because of the injuries to the other two center backs. And that's a January buy for you. I'm curious what you guys think about this coming January, which obviously starts in just a few days from when we're recording this. Like Spurs will be permitted to sign players come January 1. And will they? I don't know. Like what can ENIC, I think when we talk about ENIC and Levy and all these things, like what is in their capability? And Caroline, I want to tie this to what you said earlier. You brought up the 3 straight windows of not bringing anyone in. The reason that this club is still paying for that is because of the actions of the board since then. They have not reacted or overreacted to their inaction in those times. They've kind of just reverted to doing things like you normally would. But you're right when you say that we're still feeling the effects of that because they haven't overreacted. They haven't changed wage structure. They have not went out and I hate the term splash the cash, but they have not splashed the cash on a game-changing player. They've made really, really good signings and really, really important signings over the last handful of years of players that wouldn't be included on that list that we discussed earlier, the no faith list. But there's also a lot of no faith players on this club right now. And there's a lot of players too who are starting to see the end. I think we know that. Like we talked about Sonny earlier. So like what can be done in this January, not only to balance how can we make this a short-term fix, but also how can we continue to grow the long-term? I know that's like a really heady question, Caroline, but I'm going to start with you. Like, what can freaking be done in January to make any of this look like it can go in a positive direction?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one because I hear you in that perhaps the club needed to be a little more aggressive in those windows since, but at the same time, we don't want to like overcorrect and then end up again with players that we have no use for. And I think the one way that they have reacted well to that, getting set behind is that in the past summer, we did release a lot of players. So we're starting to at least clear room for the players that we want and need. The problem is still going to be with this window, we're in a situation where clubs who could potentially sell to us know that we're desperate because of the injury crisis. Players who might come know that we don't have a guarantee of European football next summer. And I know, obviously Ange has said, I don't want to bring in players whose sole focus is playing in European competition. But, I don't know if the club agrees with that. Obviously, they're going to want to bring in players who are of that caliber, and it's not easy to do, especially in the January window. So I guess my short answer for you is I have no idea what they're going to do. But I think we have to have a little bit of balance between trusting that some of our key players are going to come back from their injuries and be all right and be able to contribute right away. Because we don't, like you said, we don't want to get stuck with another, Radu Dragishin situation. No offense to him. He seems like a nice guy. Just not a good fit for the squad.
And Scott, I also think it's not as simple as striking a balance between players for the now and players for the future, because like they've been trying to do that and I don't think doing it very well. I think they overloaded, especially in the summer, on a lack of players for the now. Like Dominic Solanke is pretty much the only one that they have brought in, and he's been good. Like I no slander to my boy Dom, but like they have not brought in other players that are ready made to just get on the pitch and go. And that's obviously way harder to do in January window as well, because it's the middle of the season.
Yeah. I mean, if I look at what we've done under Johan Lange / the Ange Postecoglou project, I think, and again, my personal opinion, I think it screams Levy, the club, will say ENIC in general. We talked on the last episode about how Levy has a profit and loss sheet that he's held accountable to, right? So I'll say ENIC. It screams to me that ENIC is saying, okay, we'll spend buckets of money, but we're going to make sure that there's a strong return on investment on the other side of this money that we're willing to spend. So again, profits and losses over football. You guys know where I stand when it comes to ENIC. I'm not a fan, right? I'm not screaming purple and gold, but I'm not a fan at this point. And I think the windows under Johan Lange tell me exactly what I need to know, that Lange seems to be somebody who is willing to play in the game that Levy wants to play, right? And maybe he has no choice. I have no idea, but that's just, again, my perception and the way that things are being perceived by a lot of people. Now, if the question is, what do we have to do this January? I think you absolutely have to bring in 2 wingers, and you have to send Timo back to Germany probably to be able to do that. And you need a center back. I had a certain center back in mind, and I appreciate Caroline bringing something to light to me today. I thought Mark Gahey would be a wonderful signing for the club, and it turns out he's used his faith to lean on bigotry, we could say, right, at best. And as a religious person, I shared in the chat, I'm a bleeding heart liberal who's very religious, and I just don't – that stuff drives me up a tree. So I agree with you. I'm not interested in someone who wants to play that game, but we need a center back. I don't know who that is beyond Gahey at all, but we need a center back, and we need 2 wingers desperately who can beat a man, because if we don't address the winger problem, things are not going to get better for this club, because teams are going to continue to set up shop and they're going to continue to beat us on the counter. It's either we sign 2 wingers or Ange changes the way that we're playing football. And I think we know what the latter, would be in terms of whether or not
one of those ain't happening.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to invest in the wing position.
I'm skeptical that much even gets done especially in terms of ready-made players. I just am. I think that
because players need to go out, and that's also
right.
Easier said than done in the winter window. That's the thing that I'm most concerned about is, we've got players that we know are not at the level, but is this the right time to move them on? Probably not. So.
Well, and when you talk about the injury stuff too, like I think we're hopeful that we get good returns from Romero, Van de Ven, who else?
Probably Udogie again.
Udogie, who went down again. We saw Radu pick up a knock on Thursday, but still play. Vicario, hopefully he comes back healthy in a handful of months still. There's just so many, the laundry list. I mean, Ben Davis, we didn't even mention, was supposed to come back for this match against Wolves today, but suffered a setback and is not going to be back for weeks again now. It's like, that's been the other really hard part of this season, is knowing that guys have been working their way back and then getting re-injuries. I mean, it happened with Odebear to the point where he had to have surgery. And that's where I just still I'm very skeptical of can this system work in this league? Because there are so many games, and it does put a strain on the body. Like, they need guys who are built for this. And I don't know for sure that they have enough of those guys. There's so many guys who are suffering. It's not blame, by the way. Like, the human body can only take so much, but when you're asking for this much out of these players, you're gonna need a deep squad, and they don't have a very deep squad right now in order to get through it.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I'll say if you get Romero, Van de Ven, Davies back healthy, you can, and I promise you, Levy's not paying me to say this, but you can probably get by without buying a center back because of how good Archie Gray's looked. I think Archie Gray gives you, with a healthy Davies, Van de Ven, and Romero.
Who are all still multiple weeks away, we think, from coming back. Like, we're talking probably mid to late January for all three. And I guess my question would be, how much reliance do you have that all three of those guys are going to be able to stay healthy throughout the rest of the season?
And that's where I was going with this next, is I have no faith that will happen because of the way that we play. And so, again, those defenders, each and every one of them across the back line, are running probably double what their teammates are running. And I don't know for sure, right? I'm just throwing that out there, but significantly more, I would say. They're full sprint, much more than the rest of their team. That's the system. So either we have two absolute quality players at each one of those four positions, maybe 2.5 at times, we could say, right? But either we have that, or we make a change. I do think, again, back to Andy's capability in the Premier League. When you're at Celtic, there's no way you're going to have to run as much as when you're in the Premier League. I mean, look at Wolves today. They're in 19th place, if I'm not mistaken. They're a good side. They're full of talented players. The team in 19th place in the Scottish League, which doesn't exist actually, but we'll say the team that is second to last in the Scottish League, we'd beat them by 10 goals if we really played on our day, right? And so, again, there's just a massive difference. And I don't know that there's anyone who is capable of playing in the manner that defenders are asked to play on this team in the best league in the world, where 1 through 20 is a very, very good football team. Maybe not Southampton at times, but you get the point.
I don't want to slight Wolves either. They're 17th. Shout out to our friends at the Whole Lot of Wolves pod, who we haven't connected with them in a while. Maybe that's for the better, because Wolves really sure do seem to be the bogey team for Spurs. We have a terrible record against them.
We haven't beat them
in a while.
Yeah, 3 years maybe.
It's been a couple.
Think it was 2022 or 21.
Yeah, it's been a while. I feel like every time, doesn't matter where Wolves are on the table, they could be as high as 8th or 7th, or as low as, like you said, 17th, which is where they are after today. And no matter what, they're going to give you a tough one, home or away. They're just always a tough team to play against for some odd reason. It's weird. That's, I think, going to do it for today's pod, guys. We obviously have a lot to discuss in the coming year as we wrap this year up. Just want to thank all the listeners for giving us support throughout 2024 and beyond. This is our 212th episode of this podcast. It has been a joy and a pleasure, and we really enjoy all the interaction with the regulars. And shout out to all of you who show us so much love. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. You can leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice to help spread the word about the show. We will be back next weekend. Spurs have Newcastle. Oh, yay. That's always a fun one for us. If you'll remember, of course, Spurs lost 2-1 at St. James Park back in September. So this is the first of the reverse fixtures. And then the week will not be very slow after that, of course, because Spurs then have that match against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup, the semifinal first leg after that, and then a trip to Tamworth to face them in the FA Cup after that. So the matches are not slowing down now that the festive fixtures are coming to an end. They're still going to continue through January with cups galore and plenty more Premier League matches. But we'll be here to chat with you about it all. For Scott, he can be followed at Scott G. Bird. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefko. You can follow me at Aesthetica. Most importantly, follow us at Tottenham Depot for all of your Tottenham fun. We'll talk to you next week. As always, come on, you Spurs.